The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. That was the first thing that registered. Second was the sound. Two muffled reports, close and final, like someone slamming a door in a dream. Then screaming, then silence. She was already down when the third person in the room understood what had happened. Linda Mercer had been district manager of the Kessler Beverages Distribution Center on Industrial Boulevard for 6 years. 47 years old, divorced, 2 daughters in college. She drove a white Honda CR-V with a bumper sticker that said, "Ask about our recycling program," and a small dent in the rear quarter panel she kept meaning to fix. Her office had a fake plant on the filing cabinet that she watered every Monday and Thursday, and a framed photograph of her girls at a cabin in Wisconsin, squinting into summer sun, their hair still damp from the lake. She was not universally loved. She was, however, universally respected. And in distribution center management, those are rarely the same thing. Linda Mercer ran a tight operation. She arrived at 5:45 every morning, before the floor crew, before the office staff, before the security guard finished his first cup of coffee. She kept a handwritten log of daily numbers in a leather binder that predated the company's digital tracking system by a decade. When the software crashed in November 2019 and took 3 days to restore, it was Linda's binder that kept operations running. She never mentioned it. Her assistant manager found out later that she had stayed until midnight both nights, transcribing her handwritten notes into email form so the warehouse could function. Her management style was direct and unsentimental. She did not do morale events. She did not organize potlucks or birthday cakes in the break room. She believed those things were management's way of buying affection they hadn't earned through competence. What she did do was simple. She remembered what she promised people, and she delivered on it. Promotions, raises, schedule changes. If Linda Mercer said it would happen, employees factored it into their lives accordingly. That reliability was the foundation of every bit of trust she had built in 6 years. She had been promoted to district manager from assistant manager at Kessler in 2018. Before that, she had spent 11 years at a competing distribution firm, working her way from order picker to shift supervisor to assistant operations manager. She had seen the inside of 3 different companies and understood something many managers never learned. People do not leave jobs because of money. They leave because of unpredictability. Linda gave them predictability. The Kessler Industrial Boulevard Distribution Center employed 43 people across 2 shifts. Second shift ran from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And it was second shift that reported to the floor supervisor position that became vacant in early March. The job came with a 12% pay increase, a private office, and supervisory authority over 11 warehouse employees. 31 people applied internally. Dennis Holloway had worked at Kessler for 9 years. He was 34, born in Gahanna, Ohio, a suburb of Columbus. He had graduated high school in 2009, attended Columbus State Community College for 2 semesters before dropping out to help his mother after his grandmother's stroke. He had worked a series of warehouse and manufacturing jobs before landing at Kessler in 2015 as an order picker on second shift. He transferred to first shift in 2017, applied for a team lead position in 2019, and was passed over in favor of a candidate with forklift certification. He obtained his forklift certification in 2020. He applied for the assistant supervisor role in 2021 and was told the position had been eliminated due to restructuring. He had a clean attendance record, 0 disciplinary incidents in 9 years. He was quiet in meetings, did not volunteer, and had never filed a formal complaint. Co-workers described him as pleasant, but hard to read. His direct supervisor at the time, a shift manager named Patricia Young, told investigators later that Dennis was one of those employees you only noticed when he wasn't there. Linda Mercer knew Dennis Holloway's file. She had read every performance review in it during her first week as district manager. She had also noted, with the same clinical attention she gave all personnel data, that Dennis had applied for 6 internal positions in 4 years and been passed over each time. She had reviewed each of those decisions. 2 of them she would have made differently. 4 she agreed with. On March 3rd, Linda posted the shift supervisor position. Dennis Holloway applied on March 5th. The internal selection committee consisted of Linda Mercer, her HR coordinator, a woman named Sandra Allworth, and the operations director for the Eastern region, a man named Carl Reinhold, who worked out of the main corporate office 2 states away and had never set foot in the Industrial Boulevard facility. Sandra Allworth conducted the initial interviews. Linda Mercer conducted the secondary interviews. Carl Reinhold made the final call based on their combined recommendations. There were 4 finalists. Dennis Holloway was not among them. The candidate selected was a woman named Tamika Bronson, 29, who had been with Kessler for 3 years. She had a bachelor's degree in supply chain management from Ohio State. She had also completed the company's advanced inventory certification program, which Dennis had never enrolled in despite its availability. Linda Mercer's evaluation notes, later subpoenaed and entered into the trial record, described Tamika as exhibiting strong spatial reasoning, clear verbal authority, and consistent performance metrics across all evaluation periods. Of Dennis, she wrote, 9 years of reliable attendance, limited initiative outside assigned tasks, no advanced certifications, not the right fit for this specific role at this time. Dennis Holloway was informed of the decision by email on March 21st. He opened the email at 3:17 p.m. on second shift, according to the company log. He did not reply. He completed his shift. He clocked out at 10:02 p.m. and left without speaking to anyone. Co-workers who worked alongside him that night said he seemed quieter than usual, which was itself unremarkable because Dennis was always quiet. A forklift operator named Marco Reyes said Dennis had asked him that evening what he thought of Tamika Bronson. Marco said he told Dennis she was fine, I guess, seems competent. Dennis had nodded and said nothing else. 3 days later, on March 24th, Tamika Bronson accepted the position. Her start date was set for April 7th. The week between March 24th and April 2nd was the week co-workers later described in trial testimony and police interviews as the period when Dennis Holloway began to change. It was not dramatic. That was the problem. That was what everyone would later say, in the bewildered language people use when something unthinkable has just happened and they are trying to locate the seam where the possible became impossible. He was not himself. He was off. He was different. These phrases appear in dozens of witness statements, each one carrying the same weight of regret. Marcus Decker, who worked the loading dock with Dennis, told police that Dennis had stopped eating lunch in the break room. He started taking his breaks alone, sitting in his car in the parking lot, sometimes for the full 30 minutes. Marcus said he had knocked on Dennis's car window once, on March 27, to ask if he wanted to join the Friday night bowling league some of the guys had organized. Dennis rolled down the window just enough to say no. He was looking at something on his phone. He did not say what. Sandra Allworth, the HR coordinator, told investigators she noticed Dennis had started arriving 15 to 20 minutes before his shift began and just sitting in the locker room, not reviewing anything, not on his phone, just sitting. She said it reminded her of the way some employees behave before they quit, a kind of pre-departure stillness. She had intended to check in with him, but said the week became busy with Tamika's onboarding paperwork and she let it go. On March 31st, Dennis Holloway requested a meeting with Linda Mercer. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. No one knows what was said inside. Linda's calendar had the meeting listed as employee concerns, private. The company did not record the conversation. Linda did not enter a summary note, which was not unusual for informal one-on-ones. When investigators later asked Linda's assistant what she remembered about that meeting, the assistant said Linda had come out looking tired and had gone straight into her office and closed the door for an hour. What is known as this: Dennis asked Linda to reconsider the promotion decision. Linda told him the decision had been made at the regional level and was final. She told him she would note his interest in future openings. She told him she appreciated his 9 years of service. She told him his performance had never been in question. Dennis left the meeting and finished his shift. He did not mention the conversation to anyone. April 2nd was a Wednesday, the day Linda Mercer was killed. Second shift began at 2 p.m. Dennis Holloway arrived at 1:38 p.m. He was carrying a black duffel bag that co-workers described as heavier than it looked. He told Marcus Decker it had his gym clothes in it. Dennis had never brought a gym bag to work before. At 2:15 p.m., Tamika Bronson arrived for her first day of supervisor orientation. Linda Mercer met her in the lobby and walked her to the conference room for paperwork with Sandra Allworth. Dennis Holloway was on the warehouse floor during this time, pulling orders. He was visible on camera. At 3:40 p.m., the security camera in the main corridor captured Dennis Holloway walking toward the conference room. He was not carrying the duffel bag. The bag was later found in his locker. At 3:42 p.m., Linda Mercer stepped out of the conference room to take a phone call. She was standing in the corridor back to the wall when Dennis Holloway approached from her left. Tamika Bronson was still inside the conference room with Sandra Allworth. She heard Linda say something she could not make out. Then she heard two sounds in quick succession that she told police she would never be able to describe accurately because her brain had not yet accepted what they were. Dennis Holloway shot Linda Mercer twice with a .38 caliber revolver he had purchased from a private seller at a gun show in Columbus 8 days earlier, using cash, no background check, no waiting period, no record. He fired from approximately 6 feet away. Both shots struck Linda in the upper torso. She fell against the corridor wall and slid to the floor. The security footage, later entered into evidence at trial, shows her right hand still holding her phone when she fell. Dennis stood over her for approximately 4 seconds. Sandra Allworth opened the conference room door at that moment. She saw Dennis. She saw Linda on the floor. She began to scream. Dennis turned and walked toward the parking lot entrance without hurrying. He did not run. He did not look back. A warehouse worker named Gloria Osai heard the shots from the loading dock. She thought it was a backfiring truck at first and ran toward the corridor. She met Dennis near the east exit. She told police he looked at her with an expression she could not describe as anything other than blank. Not angry, not upset, just empty. Dennis left through the east door and got into his 2011 Ford Ranger. He drove away at the posted speed limit. He was stopped by a Gahanna police officer on routine patrol on Route 62 at 4:07 p.m., 25 minutes after the shooting, after a witness at Kessler called 911 and described the truck. Dennis was cooperative. He stepped out of the vehicle at the officer's request. He was handcuffed without incident. He did not resist. According to the incident report, the first thing he said was, "She's dead, isn't she?" Linda Mercer was pronounced dead at 3:56 p.m. at Memorial Medical Center. The county coroner listed the cause of death as gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. She was killed at 3:42 p.m. Dennis Holloway was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated murder, and 2 counts of felonious assault. The state announced at arraignment that it would seek the death penalty. Dennis's court-appointed attorney entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The defense later dropped that plea and entered a standard not guilty plea. The investigation moved quickly because of the security footage and the witness statements. The .38 revolver was recovered from the Ford Ranger's undercarriage during the vehicle inventory at the county jail. Dennis had placed it there deliberately, in a spot that required a specific tool to access, knowing it would be found eventually, but hoping it would not be found immediately. He told investigators this during interrogation. He said he did not want anyone else to get hurt. He waived his Miranda rights. He answered questions for 2 hours and 40 minutes. He did not cry. He did not express remorse in the conventional sense. He described the events of April 2nd with the flat effect of someone reading a shipping manifest. Dennis Holloway told investigators he had believed with absolute certainty that Linda Mercer had deliberately blocked his promotion. He said he had been told by a coworker, never identified, that Linda had recommended him for the supervisor position in 2021 and that Carl Reinhold had overruled her. He said this made him believe Linda had the power to influence the outcome of every promotion decision at the facility and had simply chosen not to use it on his behalf. He said he had confronted her in the March 31st meeting because he felt he deserved an explanation. He said Linda's answer had confirmed everything he already believed. Trial began in October of the following year. The prosecution built its case around 4 pillars: the security footage, Dennis's recorded statements to police, ballistics evidence linking the .38 revolver to the casings found at the scene, and the testimony of 7 co-workers who described Dennis's behavioral change in the days before the shooting. Tamika Bronson took the stand and described Linda's orientation session, the moment she heard the shots, and the sight of Linda on the corridor floor. She was composed and precise. She did not look at Dennis while she testified. The defense argued Dennis Holloway was a man broken by years of institutional dismissal, a man whose mental state had deteriorated under the stress of repeated rejection, and that his actions, while criminal, reflected a system that had failed to recognize or address his deterioration. The defense presented testimony from a forensic psychologist who diagnosed Dennis with adjustment disorder with mixed features, a condition characterized by difficulty coping with significant life changes, and opined that Dennis had been in a dissociative state at the moment of the shooting. The prosecution objected to the psychological testimony as irrelevant to intent. The judge sustained. In his closing argument, the prosecutor held up Linda Mercer's personnel file and read her final performance review aloud, the one that described her as consistent, principled, and essential to the smooth operation of this facility. He asked the jury to consider what it meant that Linda Mercer had spent her entire career being exactly what the system asked her to be, and that her reward was a bullet from a man she had evaluated fairly and correctly. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Dennis Holloway was found guilty of first-degree murder on October 17th. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The death penalty, which the state had sought, was off the table after the jury deadlocked on the sentencing phase. One juror, in post-trial interviews, said the panel simply could not agree on whether Dennis's mental state warranted the additional punishment. The same juror said everyone on the jury had agreed Linda Mercer had done nothing wrong. Carl Reinhold, the operations director who had made the final call on the promotion, testified by deposition. He was never charged with any offense. He left Kessler Beverages 18 months after the shooting and took a position at a rival firm. He did not respond to requests for comment for this narrative. Workplace violence kills approximately 500 people in the United States every year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration estimates that 2 million American workers report being victims of workplace violence annually. The majority of workplace homicide perpetrators are male. The most common precipitating factor is termination or disciplinary action. In cases where the perpetrator and victim knew each other, as was the case here, the average time between the precipitating event and the act of violence is fewer than 30 days. These numbers do not explain Linda Mercer. They do not explain Dennis Holloway. They do not explain the March 31st meeting, the duffel bag, the 11 minutes on March 3rd when a man's entire life compressed into a single and catastrophic decision. They do not explain the corridor wall where she fell, which maintenance crew cleaned and repainted within a week, or the conference room where Tamika Bronson sat with Sandra Allworth and heard 2 sounds that broke the day open. Linda Mercer's daughters held a memorial service at their mother's church in Gahanna. 312 people attended. The church was at capacity. People stood in the parking lot listening through the speakers. Her older daughter, Rebecca, gave a eulogy in which she described her mother as a woman who kept every promise except the one where she would always be there. The younger daughter, Claire, did not speak. She held a photograph of her mother at the lake in Wisconsin, the same photograph that had been on her mother's desk. Dennis Holloway is incarcerated at a maximum security facility in the northeastern part of the state. He has been denied parole at his first 2 reviews. He has not applied for a third. In a letter to the court filed during his sentencing hearing, he wrote, in full, "I know what I did. I knew what I was doing when I did it. I want people to know that Linda Mercer did not make a wrong decision. I made a wrong decision." Those are not the same thing, and I should have understood that before it was too late. It was the last time he addressed the court. He has declined all media interviews since his incarceration. Kessler Beverages implemented a new employee conflict resolution protocol 6 months after the shooting. The protocol included mandatory HR consultations for any employee who had applied for 3 or more internal positions without success. It also included a peer support program and a revised workplace violence prevention training module. The company did not comment on whether these changes were implemented in direct response to the incident. Sandra Allworth resigned 4 months after the shooting. She took a position in human resources at a healthcare firm in another state. In a statement to investigators, she said she had replayed the afternoon of April 2nd in her mind more times than she could count. She said she kept returning to a single detail: the sound of Linda's phone hitting the floor after she was shot. She said she could not explain why that detail was the one that stayed with her. Tamika Bronson left Kessler 11 months after the shooting. She took a supervisory role at a distribution center in Indianapolis. She has not spoken publicly about the incident. Her attorney released a brief statement after the trial thanking the jury and the investigators. The statement did not mention Linda Mercer by name. Linda Mercer's desk was cleared out by her daughters 3 weeks after the shooting. The framed photograph from Wisconsin was the last thing they took. The fake plant on the filing cabinet was thrown away by facilities management the following week. Case number 08-2214, Linda Mercer, 47 years old, mother of 2, district manager of Kessler Beverages, Industrial Boulevard facility, killed on April 2nd, 2025 at 3:42 p.m. by an employee she had evaluated fairly and correctly. Nobody should need to sit with that very long. They just need to understand it.